So when we see Vayomer and he said, without somebody who he's necessarily saying it to, that is where we are inferring that this is a prophetic statement, that he's saying it so that posterity will know that these are words that are passed on to him, and it's not necessarily focused on anybody who is part of the conversation. It's not Vayomer El or Vayomer, so he's not saying something to somebody else. He's saying it as a statement of, this is a prophecy that's been given to me, and it's going to be recorded. Arur, with a munach. This is going to separate us out from what's come from before and move us forward into the reality that's going to move afterwards. Ham shall be cursed, and so shall all his children who inherited his characteristics, as indicated by the shape of the reading mark. That from here on in, the curse is going to apply from this moment on. So it's going to separate us out from the reality before, where there was no curse upon Ham, and he was free to express his will without limits, to the new reality where it's going to be limited by the rules that this prophecy is going to set forwards. Kina'an, with a stabilizing etnachta. And remember, Canaan is the son of Ham. In particular, this shall apply most strongly to Canaan, who tried to master his father's ideas, being the youngest son of a youngest son, both acting with the gravest violence towards their father, as shown by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. So again, when we had read the sentences about the acts that Ham was committing, we saw that he drew on his impulsive nature of being the youngest one, and therefore the one who perhaps was able to get forgiveness more easily. And then his youngest son sort of egged him on and said, well, let's, if we're going to do it, let's do it to the max. Let's do the most that we can. So this doubling of the sense of entitlement is where the prophecy is going to rest in its ultimate sense, and that's why, if this is where the words are going to be focused on, then it gives it a sense of stability. That this is the stability that the curse is going to have. It's going to be on the worst of the worst. Eved, a slave with a mercha, lightly tied to what's come from before, and mostly moving us forward into what's going to go afterwards. Each one of Ham's sons shall be a slave with nothing more left of a human character than similar looks. He shall suffer indignation and pain all his life. Even his children shall not belong to him, but grow up as future slaves for the landlord, like Canaan following the footsteps of his father, as stressed by the directional shape of the reading mark. So this is lightly tied to what's come from before, but mostly moving us forward, that not only is going to be a slave, but a slave avadim, of slaves, and he's going to be someone in whom this idea of not having your own will and self-determination be the most important thing in your life, but rather to be shaped by events that others cause, was the fate of the progeny of Ham and the progeny of Canaan. Avadim, of slaves, number 5. This is the tipcha. This closes out the phrase and has a slight pause afterwards. However, in a most prominent way, the curse shall be applied to Canaan. He shall be a slave of slaves, on whom his superior will unload his own bitterness, being a slave himself, as denoted by the closing shape of the directional reading mark, just like he was the youngest son of the youngest. So we often see that divine punishments are meted out mida keneged mida, that when you see a punishment that perfectly fits the crime, that is sort of that allows you to realize the depth of your crime, or to give you at least some potential to not acknowledge the flaw that allowed you to do this in the first place, then that is sort of the paradigm of what divine punishment is. And being somebody who not only is lacking your ability to determine, but in a sea of others who are also lacking their ability to determine, and in a progeny that continues to have that passed on to them, is reparations for trying to doubly take this little sense of poetic license of freedom that perhaps the youngest child would have, and doubling that and doubling down on that, and making that something even more of more of more. Then the punishment is to be less of your will, of less of your will, of less of your will. So being the youngest of the youngest is punished by Eved Avadim. And we have a comment on this. There is a Polish folk song saying, Nidaj Borja z Iwanapana, God guard from an Iwana slave who becomes a lord. Because when a slave is in command, one sees hell on earth. So the concept that he's trying to relate is that if you have somebody with a twisted sense of what is right, then even if you change their circumstance, they might still remain who they are and impose that if they do gain power. And again, we get another note here. Just as Canaan was the youngest of the youngest in action, so he shall be the lowest of the lowest in life. And I think we made that comment when we said that this was Mida Keneged Mida. Number 6, he shall be with the Mercha. So this is going to likely be tied to what's come from before, but mostly move us forward into what's going to come afterwards. And I want you to note, to take notice of the fact that we've got two things that are at play here, and we've done this many, many times, with a tipcha followed by a mercha. The tipcha really imposes a pause and a stop on the narrative, but then the mercha says that it's still tied. So we're still telling the same story, but we have to interpret that pause. So I want to say that it's both the stopping element and the continuing element in play with each other, and they don't contradict each other. They add to each other. We have to interpret the one and then interpret the other. He shall be, number 6. Did everybody get what I was saying there, or was it a little too? Yeah, we're on the page with that. He shall be placed permanently in this capacity during all the days of his existence, as suggested by the directional shape of the reading mark. So not only is it going to be a punishment that applies to these two individuals, it's going to be the fate of whatever comes out of them, their progeny, because ultimately their sin was to deny Noah progeny. So the fact that it's going to be an ongoing thing is because of the act that they did. Again, Mida Keneged Mida. Because they denied him progeny, the punishment is going to continue into their progeny. Usually punishments, in at least Jewish philosophy, are ish v'cheto yumat, everybody was only judged on his act, or oseh chesed alafim, that good deeds are rewarded for thousands of generations, but evil deeds have a much shorter and more finite limit to them, that they're limited to that person or to his progeny or to 2 generations at most, and then they are absolved, they're gotten out of the system. So this is one of those exceptions, because Mida Keneged Mida, because the deed that they did was to deny progeny, the punishment continues throughout the progeny. Yet he shall be. Number 7, le'echav, with the stabilizing. Sorry, we have a note there. As it was, the tribes of Shem and Yaakov have experienced being slaves of slaves to Ham in Egypt, and ironically, they were blessed by a tav, which might be vav incomplete without it, or was this a foreshadowing of Yitzchak's blessing and the big confusion with a promised Israel?
That sounds like it needs a lot of explanation.
Right, that's why
And I think we're going to come back to that one next week, because I'm going to have to try and look up exactly what he's saying. Yeah, we're going to come back to it. Number 7, le'achav, for his brothers. At his best, he shall be a servant for his brothers who are contributing to ease their father's pain. So this is the stabilizing pasuk, that the brothers are still acting in the charitable way towards their father, so that will at least be some stability after the instability and chaos which Ham and Canaan have introduced. And we have a note here: the formulation of the curse for Canaan was comparable to his crime, which indicated that Noach applied the principle of justice based on Torah, Midah Keneged Midah. We've discussed that at length. So we'll read the sentence, and we'll notice that Vayomer, and he said, he's saying it to the wind out there. He's saying a prophecy. He's saying it so that it'll stand forever. So the word Vayomer is going to stand by itself and have a pause after it. And slave of slaves, again, is going to stand as a phrase by itself. And Yihiyeh le'achav, he's going to be that his punishment is going to stand out amongst, so his denigration is going to stand out amongst the righteousness of the others around him. So, Vayomer Arur Kenan Eved Avadim Yiyeh Le'achav. And I think we're going to end there, and I do promise that we'll come back to that note for next week. Thank you, and we'll continue next.
Thank you very much.